Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about history, Philippine history, or at least related to Philippine history. I saw this article shared on my feed, my Facebook feed, and I was like, "Ooh, this is interesting." I've heard of this before, but never really dug into it. But now I want to dig a little bit more into it. In 1582, the Japanese invaded the Philippines. It's not what you think. This is an article from last year, July 16, 2019, alright? The Japanese have always been important neighbors of the Philippines. In pre-colonial times, traders made the journey south to places like Cagayan, Pangasinan, and Manila to conduct trade deals. This continued into the age of the Spanish colonization, with Japanese Christians even settling in the country because, well, they were being persecuted in Japan because the Tokugawa shogunate was like, "Oh, we don't want Christians. That's a potential destabilizer. We don't want them here. And if we see any of them, well, watch the Martin Scorsese film Silence, which is based on a book by a Japanese Catholic named Shusaku Endo. And also the first Filipino saint, Lorenzo Ruiz. He was executed in Japan because he tried to sell in Japan, spread Christianity and all that, and well, the Japanese didn't like that, and he didn't want to step on the image of Jesus Christ on a slab, so he was like, "Okay, that's it, we're gonna torture you and then kill you." Yeah, and he was made a saint for his faith. Anyway, back to the topic, but there was also another side to the Japanese-Filipino relationship, one driven by violence and war, one that predates the Second World War. In the 1580s, the Japanese almost invaded the Philippines. Ooh, how that would have looked. Spanish colonization was at its infancy at the time. Miguel Lopez de Legazpi had just landed 20 years before in Cebu to establish Spain's claim to the archipelago. And things were still highly precarious to the colonists. They were outnumbered by native Filipinos 10 to 1. They were on a 6-month voyage away from the nearest colony in Mexico. Worst of all, they faced the threat of invasion almost every day, if not from the Filipinos, then from external forces. And it goes on and on. Basically, a Chinese ship came about, a Japanese pirate ship came about in Cagayan, and they had to fight them. You should read this article. It's linked in the description down below. And it got me thinking, how would they have fought? They both had guns at this point. Japanese had arquebuses thanks to the Portuguese. Yeah, which Oda Nobunaga had adopted. Because he was like, "Oh, cool. Like shooty thing that fires balls that are invisible. And they go through armor? Even better!" And of course, the Spaniards, they also had guns, arquebuses. Both had arquebuses, so they were like shooting at each other, but like guns during that time, they were muzzle loaders. They were loaded one shot after another, so they also would have had fought with swords. Sonny Go from the future here. I found this page detailing the Cagayan battles of 1582, saying that it most likely did not happen. We can never be too sure since evidence is kinda minuscule. Like, it looks like most of the evidence for the event actually happening is a bunch of letters. As with a lot of things in history, it boils down to a written record. And the author of this particular post analyzed the letters and concluded that it's most likely fabrication, because details within the letters do not add up. Now that one, well, of course, that's also speculation, but whether it happened or not, we need more evidence on both sides. Well, anyway, I don't profess to be a historian myself. I just talk about this stuff on video. Come on. And you may think that this is basically just some fun policing. On the other hand, you want to be a fanboy and have fun with this stuff, but you gotta make sure that these things actually happened in history, that it's actually authentic. In any case, this is just an addendum to make sure that I got my bases covered, alright? I'm not saying that the Cagayan battles of 1582 definitely happened. No, I don't know, okay? This guy really hates fanboys, doesn't he? Yeah. Well, anyway, that's enough fun policing. Back to the crapshoot. So, what? Japanese samurai? Well, if they're pirates, they wouldn't be samurai, but they would have swords. So, Japanese katana versus Spanish swords. Now, the Japanese katana has been very much a trope in anime and all that, and it's like the ultimate sword. Japanese steel folded 1,000 times can cut through your soul. Meanwhile, the Spanish were not to be defeated when it comes to steel. They had superior steel and superior manufacturing. Because, well, Japanese steel, that's basically pig iron that was refined and folded over and over. It's an elaborate process. It was necessary because, well, Japanese steel comes from pig iron. So they had to have a very extensive process in order to actually have steel that can be used for swords. In the case of the Spanish, they had what's called Toledo steel. Or Toledo. I don't know. How is Toledo pronounced?
Toledo.
So I do have the right intonations. Toledo. Or, you know, like, they soften the D, I guess. Toledo. I don't know, I'm not a Spanish speaker. Anyway, they had Toledo steel, which is renowned for its sharpness. And, like, there are, like, legendary steels throughout history. There's Crucible steel of the Vikings, Damascus steel, of course, which turned out to be more of a process, I guess. I don't know. It's that layered steel with the patterns and stuff. Pattern welded steel. And then there's Toledo steel, which was not as well known, but they were pretty damn good apparently. And according to this, well, you know, it's one of these historical websites, and they tend to be, you know, like very old school because, well, these people spend more of their time studying history and studying like historical weapons and not, you know, studying HTML, CSS. And according to this, even Japanese samurai were aware of the existence of Toledo sword steel, as it had been introduced by Spanish merchants that followed the steps of the Spanish and Portuguese Jesuits. As Japan lived in a state of continuous civil war, so this was during Sengoku Jidai, it is not surprising that some of their daimyos even came to Toledo to have their katanas and wakizashi forged there. They knew how important a perfect design and finish was for the effectiveness of a sword of Toledo. Alright, so they knew of this steel, so they must have clashed. Toledo steel versus Nihon steel. I don't know. And there's actually a community around this whole thing about, you know, historical weapons clashing. It's called HEMA. It's historical European martial arts. And yes, there's also the old, you know, arts of Asia, like Kung Fu, and, you know, Kenjutsu, Iaido, and all that. And what they like to do is, they like to spar. Let's not look at this yet. This is like Koreans playing around. And you got stuff like this. This is pretty awesome. Now, mind you, I'm sure they didn't fight with rapiers. Rapier is a duelist weapon. Close enough, you know. They had swords like this, most likely. Na espada masona laton. Yeah, they would have latons. Conquistadors were more like mercenaries in a way. They would arm themselves and stuff. They didn't have standard issue weapons, so they would have their own swords. So I should look at katana versus longsword as well. But this is katana versus rapier, and rapier being a much longer weapon. Wait, rapier. What century is rapier? 16th and 17th century. Okay, so they would have existed during this time. Alright, so this is kinda accurate, I guess. And there's like longsword and Polish saber in the background, I think. As you can see, they have to be very careful because rapier has reach, and the katana, well, most katanas are actually like shorter than 3 feet long. Yeah, they're shorter than 3 feet, the blades. And they're two-handed, so they gotta get in a little closer. And it's all about the footwork. And rapiers are like 4 feet long blades, very sharp at the tip. Yeah, sure, they can cut, but they're mostly used for thrusting. So it's a very, very tactical game. And as you can see, Katana has to do a lot in order to get in and get a slice. Entry is everything. And yeah, he has to parry the attacks of the Rapier before he can get a slash in. And I like this. I like sparring. I like how HEMA people spar. And the guy on the left must be trained in Kenjutsu. Alright, try to go for an offensive parry. Attacking block. In order to counter with his own slash. Whoa. This is some cool shit. Anyway, let's look at another one. Alright, alright. Ooh. With a flourish too, damn. But yeah, that's the problem with fighting against the Rapier. It's really long. Oh. Sorry, Kenjutsu guy. And that must have been what happened. Who knows? But yeah, the Europeans had vastly superior steel that they could actually make longer weapons. And that's why katanas had to be kept like shorter than 3 feet, because otherwise it'll be too wobbly or too brittle to even be functional. I don't know. I'm not a swordsmith. I'm not an expert on historical weapons. I'm just some dude talking crap. Yeah, here's like, and this I've always found this a little well, kind of funny, but also kind of interesting that Koreans would be into this stuff as well. This is a Korean place where here's a Rapier guy, and here's someone who's into Kenjutsu. He's Korean, but he's into Kenjutsu, I guess. But you know, cultural exchange. So they're gonna spar. But of course, it's all dependent on skill level. And of course, that's not a real sword, that's a practice sword. Otherwise, they'd be killing each other. But good on him to actually use a steel blade. Must be blunt, of course, but you know. The more weight accurate. Whoop, whoop. I like Koreans. They're very enthusiastic about, you know, stuff they get into, whether it's like StarCraft or League of Legends or martial arts. Like, come on, they have college degrees for martial arts. Those crazy guys. Oh, got him in the wrist. Looking for a spot. Whoop. Oh man, Kenjutsu guy really has to pick his spots here. Meanwhile, Rapier has all that length to hide behind. Alright, and then all he has to do is just poke him right in the chest. Or poke him in the thigh. Get the femoral artery. That's a good one. But yeah, as you can see, it's an elaborate game of chicken. That's I don't know, that's pretty much it. You go first. No, you go first. No, you go first. No, you go first. Yeah. Let's look at Katana versus Longsword. Alright, this is Phil Swift versus Wilson Humphries. Phil Swift! Is he gonna sell us a Flex Seal? Yeah! Sell me Flex Tape! Don't worry, this is a different Phil Swift. This is HEMA Phil Swift. This is not Flex Tape Phil Swift. Alright, this is Phil Swift, Terranova, School of Swords. His style is Fiore de Liberi. So, Italian. This is Italian swordsmanship, right? Cool graphics. Wilson Humphries, The Rock, Kendo Club. Style, Itoryu. Alright, so one sword style. Alright, this is Longsword versus Katana. Ooh, and it's more dynamic because they're more or less equal length. So, Longsword doesn't have all that length to hide behind. So he has to rely on parries as well. And of course, you know, this is not really a definitive test. This is sparring, so it's dependent on the skill level of the practitioners as well. So you gotta take it with a little grain of salt. Also, they're not using real weapons, they're using practice weapons. They're not fighting to the death. But, you know, it's still pretty good data that you can get from sparring matches like this. And you can see what movements they would employ, what techniques they would employ, what strategies they would go for. And I find this stuff really interesting. And a longsword with a more dynamic movement. And Kendo, of course, you know, like with any Japanese martial art, they have this kind of disciplined, very simplistic kind of movement. You'll see it all around in karate, in kenjutsu, and just about any Japanese martial art. They're less flowery, more practical. They're more they value economy of movement and energy. What? Yeah, Kenjutsu guy was like, come on, I'm gonna hit you in the head. Oh wait, not Kenjutsu, Kendo. He's using bamboo sword. Boom. Oh, got him in the head again. Kinda like how Kendo guy is not using a Kendo helmet and actually using European style. It was almost like a European helmet. Anyway, that was just a fun thing I wanted to show, you know, nothing too serious. Anyway, that's all for now. Till next time, stay Tor.